Hey, welcome to the weekly Christ-centered chiropractic webinar. I want to just quote Matthew McConaughey to start with. All right, all right, all right. We're so excited to always coach with the idea that we're building massive chiropractic clinics, just like any consultant coach would want to do, help you succeed at every level of chiropractic, your life, your finances, saving patients in the best conceivable way possible. But also, it's with Jesus. So it's that extra something. When BJ talks about that adjustment with that extra something, or that doctor who just has that extra something, if you know that story, that little something, as I think he called it, is that he has this story where he just goes out and he's poor and he's off away from his family, and yet wherever he goes, he succeeds a little bit more than you're supposed to. People make exceptions in the case of BJ, and the Bible calls that favor. So BJ had favor, and with Christ, as we go through relatively typical or normal chiropractic processes, it's with that extra something, that little something, that favor, that unmerited grace and favor that gives you power. At the seminar that we just had, Dr. Ray talked about dunamis power. That word dunamis comes from dynamite. That's where we get that term dynamite. And that dunamis power gives you the ability to break through walls, to get into places to speak and to lead, to save lives where cancers and disease goes away that wouldn't go away anywhere else, to make money, to multiply your income, to bless your family, just in a dunamis, dynamite, powerful way. It's supernatural. It's mega. There's this term mega that's used throughout the Bible that just goes beyond comprehension or what U.S. English words can say, because it talks about this presence of God working in you and through you, where there's results that you just can't imagine possible, but are possible, because with God, all things are possible. And so that's the expectation as you leave this webinar, this training, or you're watching this video. The expectation is you can take this information and it's going to go better than it would normally go. It would go better than it would go for somebody that isn't part of Christ-centered chiropractic, that doesn't have Jesus working in their lives. And so let's kind of get into the information here. But behind me, I like to do my webinars and trainings with this behind me, because this is Reinhard Bonnke speaking to 2.2 million people in Laos, and those people all came to Christ. So imagine you do an altar call and 2.2 million people come forward, and in the crowd, blind eyes are opening, deaf ears start hearing, people are jumping out of wheelchairs and tossing off their walkers and their canes, all during the speech. And I got a chance to know Reinhard Bonnke, and if you've heard me speak, you've probably heard me mention him before. But it always came down to, as you were trying to say, what is this, Reinhard? Because you don't see this anywhere, including, you could say, oh, that's because it's in Africa. Well, you go to Africa and see if 2.2 million people show up. It's not going to happen. It probably, if you have a clinic of 200 a week, when you go to Africa, you'll get 70 people will show up, which would equal 200 adjustments a week or something. That you tend to draw in what you draw in. And so I've had a lot of conversations before his passing with Reinhard, talking about what is this difference? Why do I go to a church with a great pastor, a great praise and worship team, really lovely people, but there's 300 people in the church, yet you go everywhere, Reinhard, and millions of people show up. He would do a conference in a lot of these regions the day before. They call it a power conference, and they'd have to rent out the local stadium because they get 10,000 people to a conference where he'd be training those that wanted to learn how to be a pastor or be a Christian leader in these communities, and fill the stadium. Like before the next day, putting 2 million people in the field. It was $900,000 that he needed to do a Bonnke crusade just to rent stadiums, clear the field. You could see in the image there the lighting and the speaker system that's required. They would literally go into, and they need equipment to mow down the trees and get rid of the bushes and actually create the kind of clearing necessary to fit that many people. And it just looks like when you see the different images, it always just looks like it's like a wooden, set of stands floating on a sea of people that he spoke off of. And a lot of this still goes on through Christ for the Nations to this day, thanks to him. And I've met some of his disciples who are very, very powerful. And so kind of getting into part 1 of 2 here, I want to talk about your power. We've talked about dunamis power. Where does the power come from? And so in talking to Reinhard, as again, you've probably heard me mention before, he speaks of, are you a hot burner or a cold burner? Because you can't heat up a pot of coffee putting it on a cold burner. You got to put it on a hot burner. And what I took from that, from again several conversations, it's sometimes we're hot, sometimes we're not. So that it's something that you've got to work on. So he's not saying it as if you are condemned. Like if you're a cold burner, you're condemned. You'll never be a successful preacher or chiropractor or business person of any kind. And if you're a hot one, good for you. Thank God he blessed you with heat, and you'll go out and be successful. You can be cold or you can be hot. Jesus talks about, I wish you were cold or hot, but you're lukewarm, and I vomit you out of my mouth. And this was specific to the region he was talking to, where these were lukewarm people. And so we don't want to be lukewarm, but just like Jesus presented it and Reinhard presented it, you can choose to be hot. So how do we do that? How do we go into this day, this week hot, so people do get saved? Blind eyes do start to see. People start coming in from the east, the west, and the north and the south. How do we get to the point where suddenly there are divine appointments all over the place? Everywhere you walk into, it seems like they've been waiting for you. People are making exceptions for you. All kinds of great things are occurring because you're walking with Jesus. You're hot. So how do we get there? So first, it is a daily thing. Dr. Rob, myself, Dr. Ray, we don't wake up hot. Reinhard Bunke, he does not wake up hot. We generate the heat through this process of reminding ourselves about Jesus working in our lives. And there's a number of ways to do it. There's prayer, there's reading the Bible, there's listening to sermons, there's whatever is required to get you hot again. And so I can tell you that I've been cold and I've been lukewarm and I've been hot. I've been all three, but whether or not I was the right temperature always came down to, was I doing what was necessary? So you look at a Dr. Schiffman who has, been white hot for over 40 years. Well, nobody in the history of chiropractic has seen the kind of volume he has, kind of like Reinhard. Nobody's seen the kind of volume he's seen. But the reason is that nobody in history has prepared like Dr. Rob is prepared. So he's up, early in the morning and has been 7 days a week for 4 decades plus. And he's in his Bible. He's praying loud and outwardly to God, screaming for all he's worth. He's listening to sermons and praise and worship music. He's doing what's necessary to get him white hot. I also add to it, I do that. Plus there's green book readings, there's quotes, there's pictures and testimonies I'm looking at, because these are things that I need additionally to really get me on fire. Again, I've been both. As I was kind of coming to the end of being full-time in practice, what was happening is I was now consulting, and we had a couple hundred clients, and I had the Body by God book. And so I had other work to do. And so sometimes I'd go into the clinic and I'd be, making some phone calls about some trip I'm making to go speak for Body by God. I'm prepping for a seminar for our, several hundred clients that we were training at the time. And then would have to go right out and walk in to adjust, 400 people, for the day. And I'd go out there going, man, you're not hot. You're a cold burner, or even worse, you're kind of lukewarm right now. And I could feel it. And sometimes I would actually go back into my office and at least kind of read something, look at some of the images, say a really aggressive short prayer, and then go back out there, because I could tell these people are not getting me and Jesus, they're just getting me. And that's a shame. I don't want them to just get me. They didn't come for Ben. They came for Jesus working in and through Ben, so that a touch from me or a word from me was something coming from the Holy Spirit and not from me. And so, or at least mostly not from me. So, I had I had very keen awareness of when I was hot and when I was not. I was, during that same transitional time, I would still do my doctor's reports twice a week and try to really be very careful of that hallowed ground, that this holy ground I was standing on of a doctor's report. I would really work hard to protect that time. And but then one time, I remember very distinctly, I'm like, boy, there's so many things coming up that are busy work for this event that was about to occur. Let me just, before I do this report, let me just look at those couple of emails that I know have probably come in by now. And as soon as I did, I felt the heat just rush out of my body. I felt myself go completely cold. And then I had to walk out to 7 people sitting there at my celebration clinic to do a doctor's report, knowing full well they're not getting the kind of fire that I want them to get, so that there's that, as we've been talking about through this entire training, that extra something, that little more than a human can provide. I could tell that was gone. It was just Ben trying to convince these people to start chiropractic. And the results were just, it was okay, but not the kind of supernatural results that you get when you're on fire. And so I had man results, and I'm not interested in man results. And I don't want these people to get man results. I was talking about at the seminar this past weekend at the Christ-Centered Chiropractic Seminar, that I've had people say, hey, can I just get the chiropractic and you leave the God stuff out of it? Because, it was everywhere, still is. I'd say, well, listen, I can't do that because that's not how I work, but you don't want that. You don't want the not God adjustment. You don't want the lukewarm cold care. You want the stuff that's on fire. That's why you're here. You heard about me because of the amazing results I get. You're asking me to eliminate the element of the supernatural, and I don't recommend that, and I don't do it. I'm kind of like Peter in that. Peter had already tried this without Jesus. He had denied his master and saw what that was like. And so after he got thrown in prison, when they let him out, they said, listen, stop talking about Jesus. We're going to throw you back in. He's like, then throw me back in. I'm not going to do that again. I can't help but talk about what I know. And I love that about Peter, because we've all been both. So let me give you just one practical thing that to wrap this up, and then also if anybody has a question, you can just throw it in the chat there, and I'll respond to our interactive webinar here. So how do you get not just you, and this was a question that came up before the event, how do you get the team on fire every time? I get that question more than any other question I've gotten after a quarter century of coaching is, how do you keep the team inspired? And it's not one thing you do, it's what you do every time. Because as I mentioned, becoming hot, getting on fire, not being cold or lukewarm, that's a daily thing. And I've heard people say it's like brushing your teeth or taking a shower. You have to do it all the time for it to be effective. So you can't shower once a month and you can't inspire once a month. You can't brush your teeth twice a year or it doesn't work. You got to do it twice a day for it to work. And same thing with inspiration. If I got 2 shifts a day, a morning and afternoon, I have to inspire my team twice. And then if that's 8 shifts a week, that's 8 inspirational moments a week, plus a team training, that's 9 inspirational moments a week, times 4 weeks a month is 36 inspirational moments, times obviously 12 months a year. And they're being continually and aggressively inspired. And that's how you inspire a team. So let's talk about the huddle. So huddles should occur 1000% of the time. That you've got 15 minutes before the shift starts, you should always huddle. Some people do a half hour, but I like to get there a half hour early and do my preparation for the huddle, because like anything else, I want to make sure I'm prepared and go rock this huddle. That to me, there's no such thing as an average, ordinary huddle. As I always say, do not call the amazing ordinary. Do not call the amazing normal. Everything we do is holy ground. It's all hallowed. Everything's hallowed territory, especially the huddle. So I've got to be prepared for it, not winging a huddle. And again, no one's perfect. I've wung a few, but I always knew I was winging it and blowing it. And that's going to affect the shift and every patient coming through. So in the huddle, there's a few things we do. One, I know I've got to be prepared to inspire. So every huddle, I've got something, whether it's a Bible verse, a quote, a testimony about a patient, or something negative, something that I'm going to pull from the media about the latest drug that's killed people, the latest side effects of the vaccines, and remind them that's what we're fighting every day in this clinic. That's what we stand for. This is our mission. So they're fired up. By the way, the end in mind of a huddle is that at the end, there's just they staff can't help but go, yes, high five, hug, like that's the end in mind of a huddle. If they leave the huddle like, okay, there was another huddle, time to start the shift, then I wasn't prepared. I didn't lead a great huddle. So, I would suffice to say that how well you can lead a huddle is how well your shifts and overall your practice will perform. It's really that simple. No different than, sorry for the metaphor, the sports metaphor, but it's no different than a football game. How well you go into those huddles and prepare to execute the plays will have a lot to do with whether or not you score a touchdown. So again, inspire. Then prepare, and this is why I say I get there early before the huddle, because I look at every single patient. Even when I was seeing hundreds of shifts, I look at every patient coming in to determine, is there something special and unique we need to do for any individual, as well as what we might have to perform that shift on top of their normal visit, or who is it, just love on them, adjust them, tell them the power's on, and be clear when their next appointment is. So who's who, so that we're ready for the people. And this to me is very Christ-centered, because God, thankfully, doesn't look at the 9 billion people on planet Earth and go, yeah, I mean, I gotta just deal with 9 billion people today. The Bible is very clear. God's counted every hair on your head. That's how important every one person is to God. He knows every hair in their head. He cares more about the details of every individual person's lives more than they do. He cares about us individually. He's called you by name. He knows you. So are we that prepared for each individual person coming in? Because that's what makes this Christ-centered more than anything. So if we're not prepared for the individuals and we're just waving our hand over the appointment book and saying, okay, we're ready for 10, 50, 100, 500 people, that's not God. That's not how he does it. And so I want to do it as close to how God does it as possible. So I prepare, and that's my preparation. So when the team walks in, I'm like, okay, here's my 10, 15 people. Do you have anybody you want to bring up, so that we make sure we're ready to crush, to be hot for these key people coming in that need something extra or have something extra going on today. So we go through that. That just takes a few minutes, and then we pray. And one really key thing to prayer is pray for the staff. You want staff that's behind you, that loves you, that feels that this clinic's been part of being called according to their purpose to serve God and save lives, and just feel that God's working it all out for their good because they are in their purpose, that this is fulfilling their destiny. You want that to be the case? Then pray for your staff. And those specifically are there things they need prayer for, because I used to blow this. I used to do this completely different. I always prayed for the shift, prayed for the patients, but you do that too. After praying for the staff, I'll pray for the shift and the patients. But I used to only do that. And then I realized, well, the staff's like, well, what about us? And I would like to say that I figured it out quickly. It took me many years to figure this out. But that when I did figure it out, boy, did my staff transform. And the first time I did it, they cried. And that's how I really know I had been blowing it. But man, does it make a difference going to that shift that your staff knows they've been prayed for, that you love them like that, and you've put them first before the practice and the patients. So if you do the things we talked about in this training today, your life, your practice, the impact you're making, the miracles, the money, the divine appointments that are going to show up in your community, both direct and through your patients, it's going to go off to an exponential level. So hopefully you really heard me today. I don't see any questions on this particular webinar, so I appreciate you all. Bless you. Remember who you are. And also remember that with God, all things are possible.